So I only compare 3 months. We only compare January, February, March. I'll talk to you. I gotta get set up here. Uh-oh. Is my friend Mike here? That was a joke. Yes, you gotta remember. Flying out on the 27th.
Hi, Rich. Thanks for coming. You okay?
I don't know. I keep getting I instead of you.
All right.
It's changing itself. That's a very efficient baby. It changes itself.
Huh?
It's killing me.
I know.
You got one of those? Those bagel chips are sure more tasty than those buffalo chips. Graduation is a week from Saturday. Right there. On the camera? Is that good? Speak up. Speak up to the lamp, right? So it's all in there?
Yeah, there's the microphone.
Oh, I see it now. It's camouflage. It matches the tripod. I didn't even notice it.
As of last weekend. I think you should just make it. Yeah. We're trying to figure out how to touch the character.
No, I'm talking about your fingers.
Oh, I broke it.
After softball, I presume?
Yes. We're good playing soccer. I'm playing goal and one up to make a save.
Oh, stop.
Finger went like that. That's horrible. I can still have it.
I almost happened to roll through.
Wait 1 minute here. Oh, you figured out how to do it?
Well, my only
That's good.
now is changing the font. Yeah, we're just trying to figure out how to change the logos.
Everything's working. I didn't break anything. That big view radar image, is that on Fred's page that they showed in the corner?
Which one was it?
It was a nice national radar image.
I'm not sure about the national one. There are north, like regional sectors, though.
Here's a. Usually just like go like this.
Yeah, I don't think there's a national.
Clear my head and go back.
I use this one.
Yeah, that's the only one that I know of.
Actually, it links to these in case. But
Yeah.
what's that with the invisible sound right there? You can't see. Microphones?
As long as you get a server.
None. All right, everybody, so we're going to get started. Thanks for coming. The final weather briefing of the semester. Rich Grumm is here from the Weather Service, and he's got a lot of good stuff for today. I saw a preview of his PowerPoint. Looking forward to it. Thanks, Rich.
Well, good afternoon. This is the last. How many people listened to their last panel discussion? Moving on to different pastures. Greener, browner, whatever. Okay. How many people are graduating in about a week and a half? We'll take a look at the finals week. It's a final weather weekend, right? So, some of the data I'll show has some contributions by Samantha Ballard and Andrew Thomas. I use some of the data in here. So, anyway, we had some interesting weather this last academic year. We had the nice winter pattern. We had several people come back in October and September, November, pontificate about the El Nino to be or not to be. That was the question. And we did end up with a locally cold period. Most of the winter we didn't really have an El Nino, so it was kind of late. We had a nice, more recent April severe weather map, so we'll kind of look at that. And then we can we'll look at some of the short-term weather and the finals week weather and graduation, because there'll be map discussions for some of us to come. And if you remember back in the autumn, the big thing about the pattern was Mr. Ridge out there on the west coast, and turns out he's leaving too. So this is from the NACE. This is like the current pattern over the I can use the mouse, right? You can see the remnants of Mr. Ridge and out in the west, and we're still kind of trophy. And later, by next weekend, you can see there's a remnants of Mr. Ridge on the east coast finally. It's like, and we got remnants. We got some nice, relatively warmer, higher temperatures in the eastern United States. So the winds of change are in the atmosphere here for us, though. Finally, so I guess for some of us, spring has sprung. So our winter. We had a winter of bookend snows. We had early snow right before Thanksgiving. For those who were in town, we had a snowstorm. And if you lived in New England, it was winter to remember. Here it was just kind of cold. And but we had these bookend snows. Thanksgiving Eve, it was locally like 4 to 6 inches of snow. And then we had sort of like one of the last Fridays of the month. We had of March. We had a nice little snowstorm. It melted really fast, which happens in March. So we're going to look at the mean patterns using standard deviation. Some people like to look at the nice patterns, but I prefer the means. And we had the blob and the ridge. Probably due to the interactions of the flow of the Pacific, especially the tropical areas, to be more specific. But Mr. Ridge over the eastern Pacific gave us this warm water blob. I put a link in there if anybody gets this. There's been a lot of people blogging about the blob. And of course, Steve McQueen knew how to kill the blob. It just took some CO2, which is kind of ironic, right? Warm water blob, CO2. So the global warming joke there. But we ended up being a nice island of cool on a warming planet. So this is what the blob looked like. Everybody was talking about the blob, all the warm water, stuck up in the high latitudes along the west coast of North America and off the coast of California. And this pattern led to this semi-persistent ridge most of the winter that allowed us to stay in north or semi-northerly flow a good chunk of the winter and kept us relatively cold despite how warm it was. And so everybody's been talking about that and blogging about the blob. And you have to be born in the 60s or 50s to understand the CO2 reference, right? It's a joke with that. So here's the evolving pattern. This is the pattern what it looked like actually in the mean for November. There was a kind of a big ridge up, high latitude ridge actually over Alaska, and there was a ridge out over the Atlantic Ocean. We were stuck in a mean trough, and our heights were a little bit lower. Our temperatures actually at 850 were pretty close to normal. The cold air was actually displaced originally in November a little bit to our west. In November, moving into this month of December, we actually kind of warmed up. There was a lot of fast flow of the Pacific, and our heights actually ended up averaging above normal for December, so we didn't have that bad in December. And there was actually some warm air trapped just over our area to the north, but all our heights were pretty much above normal. And when we moved into January, Mr. Ridge came into full force, probably due to the blob, and this big trough kind of dominated most of eastern North America. There was a really good trap pool of cold air. I mean, the average for the entire month was between about -28 and -30 Celsius at 850 over central northern Canada. And you can see, we were at the surface. I should look here. It's easier to look here than there. There was a kind of a weak troughiness, so we had some waves come through. We were stuck in this big mean trough in the eastern United States. But you can see like a huge amount of the United States, especially in the height fields from the Gulf Coast all the way up actually to Alaska, were really above normal in terms of heights. the 850 temperatures show that the warmest air was kind of focused over the southwestern California, and up into so we had a kind of a chilly January, and we moved into February. The ridge on the west coast persisted, and it pumped even colder air into our part of the world, and we ended up, on the order of -1 to -1.5 standard deviations below normal over most of the northern lakes into the mid-Atlantic region. And that was our really coldest month, and we had a couple of, I know I got down to -13, -14 Fahrenheit at my house with it. And you can see at the surface, even in the mean, there was a kind of almost a standing anticyclone at times, allowing, implied northerly flow. I can find Mr. Mouse with Mr. Ridge into our area. So it was a really good pattern. If you like cold, and we did okay for snow. What did they end up total snow here officially? 52-ish. Yeah, that's about right. And then one of them was that really nice fluffy snow towards the end of the winter, like 25-to-1 ratio snow. So then we moved into March, and Mr. Ridge kind of shifted a little bit to the east. Our heights kind of rebounded to normal, but we still were in a relatively chilly pattern. We had some good snows in March, but the ridge kind of did hang tough through most of the month of March, and you can see that it was actually very, very warm on the west coast of the United States. So that kind of summarizes our winter. And this is the pattern right around the time of our November kickoff snow. I think that was the Michigan State weekend where it actually snowed in the morning. But it was really chilly just before Thanksgiving. And then this is an average for this a 24-hour period around the time of the snow, so you can see it actually in the mean little wave off the coast. I'm going to guess most people, unless you live here, missed the snow right before Thanksgiving. And then this is what December kind of looked like. The thick blue lines are kind of our daily curves of 850 temperatures, and then the black and the shaded show kind of just the daily unsmooth mean, and then the 1 standard deviation above and below the mean temperatures at State College. You can see it was kind of we had some cold periods in December. Actually, at 850, it ended actually quite cold. Although my house had never got extreme. I think I never got below like 13, but we had a lot of periods where we were above normal. Some periods we were below normal. We kind of ended on a cold note. I don't know if it was a high C or a low C. And then we moved into January. This is January. You can see we actually had a big warm-up right after New Year's. It got pretty warm here. I think I got to 49 degrees, I think, on my thermometer. And then we had our first big chill. Well, I don't know if that was a really good movie or not, but we had our first big chill. And then we kind of warmed up, and we stayed pretty close to normal until the very end of the month. Right around the 27th, of course, was the big East Coast snowstorm. And we moved into February, and February was really skewed to being cold. We had this prolonged period of cold weather that kind of persisted right into this area here. But February clearly was a chilling month, and we ended the month on a cold note too. And then we moved into March and slowly kind of mitigated. And this is the pattern that during the period of 13 through 21 February was extremely cold period of time for us. We were much below normal at 850. The -20 contour actually comes down into New York State at 850. So over that like 8-day period of time, the average 850 temperature was well below normal for our part of the country. We were in a really, really deep trough. And of course, we can't forget, Mr. Ridge and the blob, right? So, and then we moved forward. This is what March, and we started to progress towards normal. Though we ended the month on a cold note. We had that late season snow. And this is the season-ending snow. This is the QPF we had, and then this was like this kind of snowfall total. It was kind of a widespread in central Pennsylvania, 3 to 6 inch snowfall. And then these are forecasts from the SREF, and the SREF actually, at the end of the winter knew what was going on, so it had a pretty good forecast of the bullseye of snow, high probability of, kind of 3 to 5 inch snowfall over our area. Anyway, so that sums up the winter. And then I think we warmed up into spring, and we had a severe weather event just about a week and a half ago. And this is just from the HRSH on the, I have the Cape. On this side, you can see some high capes snuck up all the way into western New York. We had some fairly strong winds at 850, and then we had some good winds. We had mainly good southerly winds over the area, and we were moist. The principal water pattern didn't show much. Relatively moist. We were cold air damp, and it produced a good day for supercells. And this is just one supercell that was in southern part of Pennsylvania, and it had a nice 3-body scattering pattern with it. It was a really deep storm, 65, 70 DBZ cores. Then of course the TBSS was pretty obvious that everybody knew that was hail in the storm, and was a pretty big storm, pretty interesting storm. And then we had a couple storms that rotated. This was a particular storm that moved through the lower Susquehanna Valley. And you can see really marked, this is looking like Sterling's wind. So this is a really strong rear flank downdraft of the storm that came through the lower Susquehanna Valley. But we had a tornado warning out in the storm, and I guess that fellow Tim, I forget his last name, who works for AccuWeather, he got some really good footage. If anybody's seen the footage from the web, he went underneath the wall cloud, and the cloud base is really low, but there was nothing coming out of the cloud. It was a really nice looking supercell that trekked across the lower Susquehanna Valley. And this is just a loop I made this morning that kind of shows the evolution of that storm. And you can see, if you look, keep your eyes peeled, you can see the supercell coming across here, and then you can see the rotation couple goes all the way across Dauphin County if you follow it in time, which really enhanced over Dauphin County. And if I switch, we had a storm come through Happy Valley, and we had our second little mini tornado in 2 years. And you can see that, if I'll put the mouse here, you'll see the nice hook that develops as it moves across the southern part of the valley. I live in Park Forest. Our ground got coated with hail, but the hail was mainly pea-sized, maybe a few pieces almost to the dime size. But as you move on this way across the valley to further to the east, people got larger hail. I think Henry Marcussetti took pictures. He had hail, so much hail that the wind blew it over in Pine Grove Hills that there was still hail around his house at noon the next day. Of course, it got chilly behind him. So, but you can see the little supercell that came through, and you can see the wind max. I'll put my mouse here. You can see the wind maximum that it develops and moves through the area, and then put the tornado down right around where the mouse is. So I just have a couple dual products on there too. But anyway, so we had a winter to remember, and I'll remember because New England had really good snow. We had some good cold air. We maintained our snow. We had a couple interesting winter storms. Most of the big stuff stayed to our east, and we had a nice end of semester, if you will, severe weather. So the great weather is behind us, and but most will have fair skies ahead of us. And now we'll look at the kind of the weather we're expecting to come up upon us. So I think I can escape, and I can minimize this. So we'll just loop the satellite imagery, and you can see there's a couple of bands of circulating around this upper level, this weak upper level low. There's a band that's coming up through western Pennsylvania. I don't know if I was looking at the HER last night and some of the high resolution model guides, and they all were showing this precip coming up at Pennsylvania and then just kind of turned to the west and was focusing all the heavy rain in west and northwest Pennsylvania, depending on which run you looked at. And you can see it's working out really nice. As the lows back through here, these little bands of intense precip are coming up through Ohio and western Pennsylvania. And despite dire forecasts a day or two ago, you probably could have bicycled to work today. So, but it looks pretty good out. Everything's the more intense and interesting stuff to our west. That you can see there's clearly an upper level low here, and if there's actually another little wave along the coast, and you can see where there's generally easterly flow. So I guess it's a blocky pattern stuff's having trouble trying to move into that little block up to our northeast. So you have good easterly flow over New England. I'll bet it's not very pleasant in Boston today with easterly flow like that. But let me zoom out. Oops, I went too far. And we look at the radar. It's good to take time to reflect, right? You can see the upper level low actually shows up in the Midwest. You can see the one band closer to the low, and then the other band that's been coming up through Pennsylvania. And then there's another wave you can see now in this projection off the coast. So we're kind of in between it all, stuck in this like weak easterly flow. So even if it rains, it probably shouldn't amount to too much in our neck of the woods. So let me see if the new one came in. The 15Z HER has loaded. So this is just the radar loop from the HER. You can see it's forecasting that band that's supposed to come up over us, and it looks like later on this afternoon it's scattered all about the state. But the primary band is this southeast to northwest looking band of precip, and it's also got the band off the little system off the coast. Let me stop the animations, please. And we could step through this, and you can see it looks like sometime after 18Z there should be some popcorn around here. So make sure you have some drawn butter with you, I guess, poured over the popcorn. But it looks like we're going to break out with showers probably this evening, but nothing great shakes. And this stuff coming up along the coast too. These two events kind of stay away from each other. If you look at total precipitation evolution, I'll do it in inches. Most of the precip this morning and early today is clearly focused well to our west, somewhere between here and Pittsburgh, going up into Lake Erie. There's actually a 1-inch closed contour of it. I don't know, anybody been using the HER recently? Have you noticed when it got convective, the QPF numbers have kind of gone way high, a little bit ridiculous, don't you think? It's got like a...
Yeah.
The complaint in the winter was had a dry bias, like my humor, but now it seems to have a wet bias, and I think that's something with convection. I've heard an explanation that, actually from a Penn State graduate, that Curtis Alexander was saying that the HER has these big 3-kilometer boxes, and it simulates these kind of huge echo cores, and they fill a 3-kilometer box. So really, in reality, they're probably a 1-kilometer. When it's raining and it's moving, but you got this one big 3-kilometer box. It's a thunderstorm, so it just dumps a little bit too much rain out. So they're aware in convective situations they have this kind of wet bias. But if you see how this evolves, it looks like by about sometime after about 19Z, we begin to accumulate light amount of rainfall here. And it looks like maybe somewhere in the area, people could look at that 1/4 to a 1/2 inch of rain by 5Z. But most of the precip is focused to our heavy stuff's focused to our west. We can zoom in a little bit and look at the 2-meter temperatures, and it's actually it feels kind of comfortable outside. It looks like it's supposed to be in the 60s here. What's the temperature right now on the deck?
63.4.
Yeah. So yesterday was nice. We got into the 70s, but it looks like some of the 70s actually get peak. We could peak at 70 according to this model actually. But it shows obviously where it's raining, it's going to be cooler. So when the rain starts, it'll cool. So how fast the rain goes, it'll probably dictate how high into the 60s or close to 70 we get.
It has a warm bias too in the summer. So.
Yes, it does. Which is weird because most 2-meter temperatures have a cold bias.
It has cold bias at night.
Yes. So, but I got the 70. What was the high here? Yesterday, 72.
72.
Yesterday was a good day. So we can move to the largest scale pattern here, and then this is the was it F11, right? As opposed to F111. That's a really old airplane. So this is the large scale pattern, and you can see the nave. This is the nave, so it's 42-member ensemble. Shows the cutoff over the lakes. We kind of saw the circulation around the cutoff, and the below normal heights. It's nice to know that when the sun's out and there's no cold convection, even with below normal heights, we can get to the 60s and 70s this time of year. And you can see the really warmth at 850s down off to our south and east, and we're kind of in kind of normal temperature-wise. And if we kind of step through this, evolve through this, the low dives to our south Friday, and then kind of lingers off the coast. And our heights just slowly rise. So there's nothing. I mean, our heights. We get into a mesoscale ridge, so weekend might not be all that bad. Of course, a lot of the models show some potential for showers and stuff. The warmest there is to our north and west. And as you evolve this in time, we start getting into the yellow zone. That's the zone for loading and unloading warm air parcels. So it looks like by Monday, Tuesday next week, we should be above normal and we'll be in a ridge. So if you believe these 42-member ensembles. And it's really hard to see, but there's actually a 1.5 standard deviation anomaly shown. We get pretty much above normal heights over our part of the woods. But the other thing that's kind of like interesting, if you look carefully, is we're building a big trough in the western United States. So we're going to open the Gulf of Mexico. So I guess people who like severe weather are probably going to get excited in the plains. We'll take a brief look at that in a second, or a couple minutes. Seconds too fast. But generally, we're going to end next week relatively warm. And what's graduation day?
Friday.
Friday. Is that the 9th? The 8th? 8th. So there you go. Friday, theoretically, it could be a little bit on the muggy side because if the moisture moves in, but we could be plus 12 at 850. At least 42-member mean is, and we're in a ridge. When the models are better with ridges than it could be a pretty nice day for May. Now I got that song from Camelot in my head, but that's he knew what I meant. So then we end kind of like quietly normal. We'll look at the SREF. We'll come down to look at the SREF real fast. And we'll just focus on the QPF problem because I've taken a lot of your time. And we'll look at the chance of like about the 1/10 of an inch of QPF. So the SREF thinks, we'll go to the SREF thinks it's going to rain, from here west, and it just kind of emphasizes the rain. This is through 9Z Friday. And then the rain actually peters out during the day Friday. It gets more showery. And then it's very isolated. It's probably a very good convective response in the SREF. But it's showing that the main energy is well off the coast with the system, that upper level wave pulling out to our east and south. And then So this shows this is the SREF through Saturday morning. It says overnight Friday, the 12-hour period from tomorrow evening to Saturday, we could probably be rain free. And then looks like a few isolated showers. If I go to the end of the period, the SREF shows some popcorn shower type stuff potentially, despite the ridge, in our area on Saturday. I think it's a good day to risk a nice day out. I'm going to try to do 60 miles on my bike. I think I said. See how wet I get. And then we go into Sunday. It kind of dries out. And there's a charity ride in Linden Hall, 28 miles. You can help a school on Saturday. A lot to do this weekend. So the SREF looks like you can't rule out showers for the next like 2.5 days. We'll move to the GEFS. Well, hopefully the new one's in, and it's not. So we go to the 6C. It's all right. And I think I'll go to the US scale because the weather. We just have showery weather, light rain, nothing to write home about, right? Not at my age, I don't really write home anymore, but that's a whole other issue. But if I loop this real fast, we can speed it out too.
You'll see. But the letters show up and you forget why you write them.
Yeah. Of all the things I've lost in life, I miss my mind the most. You can see the return moisture late next week, the plume of moisture coming up out of the Gulf into the plains. So if we switch from precipitable water to Cape, you can see we got a couple of days next week where the Cape goes, this is in the GEFS line too, we get areas where the Cape goes 18 to 2,400 joules per kilogram in the plain. So, you know, it looks like it could get somewhat exciting for people who like to, like severe weather in the plains. I guess my guess is there'll be a couple days next week where I'm past it. I think it was the 4th. Was it the 4th? There's a 1,200, 1,800 joules per kilogram. So it looks like later this weekend, early next week, we get a couple of days. We have some pretty good Cape in the plains. And if we switch to the 850 winds, you can see there's a little bit of a hint of a strong southwesterly jet. So we have some shear and some Cape. So it looks like the Weather Channel is going to be focused on the central part of the country. It doesn't look really interesting here. But it looks like after we get rid of this little brief showery period here the next day or so, looks like a pretty good week coming up overall. Although the models always show popcorn this time of year, but that looks like the exciting weather is going to be to our west, maybe early next week. So it wasn't a lot to talk about here, was there? But I managed to talk a lot anyway. So anyway, this is I just took one slide to show you the high Cape that was forecast for Sunday evening in the Cape was 1,800 joules per kilogram, running from Oklahoma all the way up into like Iowa. So it's and then I picked Tuesday too. Tuesday also had a very similar pattern, just skewed a little bit more towards like the Kansas, Oklahoma area. But you can see, and there's a lot of Cape. You also see there's a very high probability of the Cape exceeding 1,200 joules per kilogram, which is kind of in the epicenter of when you're looking at Cape shear diagrams when you're going to get some interesting storms. So we got enough Cape to make it interesting in the plains next week. And then this just shows the warm-up next week, and we probably should see temperatures running seasonal to actually above average for part of next week, it looks like. And so basically we kind of reviewed the winter for those of you who are here that enjoyed the last 6-7 months of our weather. We have a nice summer ahead of us, and we can pontificate about the weather again coming winter by the end of the summer. And then but in our local weather, we have a few showers around. Nothing big here. Most of the heavier rain should stay to our west. There's a storm coming up the coast, but we're just going to be on the showery periphery of it. And things should warm up. And then there'll be a lot of happy people graduating in about a week. Right? Any questions, alibis? Or?
Questions or comments for Rich?
One behind you. One behind you.
Back here? Yeah, go ahead. Here.
Thanks. I was actually hoping you'd be here last week because I was curious how close you were to getting a tornado warning last Monday.
I didn't work the event, but I guess they considered. But I just all the tornado warnings were in the storm to the south and east. The one I showed that was rotating through the Harrisburg area. I think there were 4 tornado warnings on that storm. No tornadoes though. They did have a severe. They were worried about large hail. There was some pretty good hail. But we actually did eventually found, by serendipitously, I guess, from a friend, that there was tree damage, and we were able to go by Collier Lake, and it was a small area damage. But I don't know why there wasn't a tornado warning on it, but usually we kind of use the radar and then some of the neostorm environment parameters, and so. But I wasn't the decision making. They were real marginal. Our shear was kind of like just barely getting into the sweet spot. Our cape was okay, but it was a tough call. Anybody else?
I have a question. If that were 10 miles to the northwest, do you think it may have been a little bit different, knowing that more population could have been impacted?
10 miles to the northwest.
Because that would have been here.
Oh, no, it would have been the other side. Okay, you
Whatever,
said it came
north,
from here.
wherever
I don't
it
know.
was.
It's how it looks on radar.
Yeah.
It's like, and what the
I mean,
neostorm
it was pretty broad rotation. But
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, the decision for Harrisburg with population consideration was definitely part of that. But then the fact that they didn't get
right.
anything from that also may have influenced their decision on the one just south of State.
Well, yeah, that one here actually occurred before them.
It did. The one with here was earlier.
The one here was
But
before that.
one thing, if you looked at the rear flank downdrift, I showed the rear flank downdrift, that storm. Those blues were 70 knots. You had 70 knots in the rear flank there. And we kind of use, we average the in and out. If it's 30 to 35 knots in and out, average, you usually kind of, unless the LCL heights are super duper high, you tend to warn. We didn't have that kind of wind here. Now that could be because our radar was too close, and we have some sampling issues to the cone of silence. But there was 70 knots of inbound winds in those blue pixels I showed at that storm that went through Harrisburg. I mean, as I'll quote Paul Markowski say, when you have a credible threat, you warn. And we knew it was a marginal day, but when you see 70 knots in a rear flank downdrift, nobody should ever criticize you for putting a tornado warning out. That storm, I think the VR shear on that thing was like 70 and 35, so it was like 50. It was almost double our criteria. So those colors were blue if you look at those images. That's like 70 knots. We didn't have anything like that in the rear flank downdrift here. So.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Rich. Appreciate it. And we'll let everybody know when this will be in the fall. Quickly want to thank all of our speakers, everybody for coming, and the group that always broadcasts this every week, because there's a decent number of people actually that watch this after the fact. So thank you guys.
We should thank Ryan for
Thanks. Thanks. We'll do this again in the fall, definitely. Thanks, everybody.